Hello. Welcome, everyone. Again, I'm Natalia Krapiva. I'm a Senior Technical Counsel at Access Now. Access Now is a digital rights organization. We defend and extend the rights of communities and people online. I work on strategic litigation and also on spyware investigations. So today we're joined by Yvonne Nashoven, who is the Deputy Head of the Cyber Staff at the German Federal Foreign Office, and she covers topics related to cybersecurity, national cybersecurity architecture, Ukraine, NATO, negotiations on cybercrime convention, and other topics. As well as Sienna Ansis, Senior Legal Advisor at Citizen Lab, who you probably know. This organization investigates sophisticated and not so sophisticated, I guess, spyware attacks against civil society, like Pegasus spyware and other types of spyware. And she also works on digital transnational repression, which we are going to talk about today, and generally targeting of civil society with spyware. So we only have 30 minutes, so we'd like to delve into the conversation, and then we hope to leave some time for questions as well for the audience. So our topic today is Germany's role in combating this problem. So just a little bit of a brief history for those who don't know. In 2019, we heard of a German public prosecutor opening an investigation into a spyware company called Finfisher. It's based in Germany. This was on the basis of some of the previous reports that Citizen Lab and Access Now have published. This spyware was used to in repression in Middle Eastern countries like Turkey and other countries. In 2022, we heard that the staff of this company filed criminal charges, and reportedly they were bankrupt. And there was some follow-up reports on other types of spyware. We heard Access Now and Citizen Lab published in 2023, just last year, an investigation of Galina Timchenko, the head of Russian independent media Meduza, hacked with Pegasus spyware while she was here in Berlin meeting with other journalists. Amnesty International, Amnesty Tech has also released some investigations on Vietnamese dissidents and journalists being targeted in Germany with spyware. So with all of these developments, I think besides the Finfisher criminal investigations, we haven't heard as many, I think, developments from the German government itself in terms of countering this problem, but we did hear that in March of this year, Germany did join the joint statement on efforts to counter the proliferation and misuse of commercial spyware, which is an initiative led by the United States. And in Korea, the Summit for Democracy, Germany has signed on. And basically this statement, in this statement states commit to take certain measures to combat the problem of misuse of spyware in violation of human rights. So I'd like to start our conversation by asking Yvonne, what, if possible, to shed a little bit of light in terms of what was Germany's thinking behind joining this statement, and what are the sort of the concrete steps that Germany is planning to take to implement these initiatives, maybe in terms of legislation, executive action, and so on?
Yes. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for being here this morning. We feel it's a very important topic, which is, unfortunately, actually, it's an important topic. I'm happy to explain a bit about our thinking about next steps. One note of precaution, much of what we are talking about is actually in the competence of the Ministry of the Interior, because the competence for the security authorities lies within the Ministry of the Interior, so I can only talk about what is within the remit of the Federal Foreign Office, but I'm very happy to do so because that's actually quite something already. So as Natalia rightly explained, we joined the joint statement this year. And let me maybe start a bit by saying what the joint statement is about. So actually it was an initiative by the United States on the occasion of the first Summit on Democracy, which happened actually on March 30th last year, so 2023. And the joint statement, it recognizes the threat posed by the misuse of commercial spyware, and it says also that there is a need for stricter control by national measures, by international measures, and it lays out some examples. Mostly we're being asked the question, why did we actually join so late? So why did we only join this year and not right from the outset back in the last year? Because of course we were asked to join already last year, and the answer is fairly simple. We felt that we would have liked to see something stronger. We felt we would have liked something much stronger, actually mostly in terms of human rights language within the joint statement. And we would also like to have seen something more concrete actually on the measures proposed, on the next steps happening. And we also would have liked to see a more encompassing amount of countries joining. So when you see the list, it's those that are pretty close to our value family, that are also the usual suspects, if you want to put it that way, that would join a joint statement initiated by the US. But of course, for something like that to work, you need those countries on board who also are actually sources for commercial spyware. But we also felt that there was something good about the joint statement, and let me point out a couple of issues we felt that are going into the right direction. For example, there is also within the joint statement a clear acknowledgement that commercial spyware has been misused by both authoritarian and democratic regimes. So we feel this is important to note. There are also given examples for the misuse of spyware, of commercial spyware, which are clearly in the human rights area. So for example, silencing opposition, which is something we will for sure talk about more today, limiting freedom of expression, tracking or targeting individuals without proper legal authorization beforehand, and also an emphasis on norms, on international cyber norms, which is something which is always very important to us as Federal Foreign Office. So why did we change our mind? Actually, what happened was that this year there was a process started by France and the UK, which is called the Pall Mall process, which has nothing to do with the cigarettes, but mostly with the location of where the process took place. It was an initiative by the heads of government and state of France and the UK who said we need to tackle this, and we felt that this is the complementary process which we actually wanted to see happen to make the joint statement more concrete. So this is why we actually jumped on it, and we said, okay, then it's the logical next step to also join the joint statement so that both processes can go alongside. And so this is why we joined at the third Summit of Democracy in Korea. Korea, for example, joined as well this year. So very briefly, because I also see the limits of time on concrete steps we're taking. So we have already some quite comprehensive legislation in place, and there we're coming also back to what I said at the beginning, that most of what we would need to do, especially when it comes to legislation, this has to be initiated by the Ministry of the Interior. But we also have signed the Code of Conduct developed within the Export Controls and Human Rights Initiative, which lies actually within the Ministry of the Economy. We as Federal Foreign Office are of course involved in all the processes at the international level. So for example, the open-ended working group, which talks about cyber norms and how to come to a more comprehensive understanding at the international level. So this is something where we push this forward. And for us, very important is actually really to bring stakeholders into the process, which is part also already of the Pall Mall process and of the joint statement, but where we feel we could do more. Nothing in the cyber arena, also including this topic, works without the industry on board. Nothing works without civil society on board. And we, of course, have to have states on board. So this is what we really want to do now in the coming month, to prepare for consecutive meetings. For example, at the Paris Peace Forum, for example, there's going to be a meeting about it, to use the time to look into best practice also, but really also, I feel there's already some strong involvement from civil society, but we feel that especially from the industry, we could really see more. So that's what we're planning to go about.
Thank you for this. I will have some follow-up questions also on sort of concrete things that we wanted to know more about, but I will turn to Sienna now. So Access Now and Citizen Lab have a history now of collaboration on various spyware investigations in El Salvador, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and the recent Jordan, and the recent hacking as well of a Russian journalist. But Sienna is also doing research on digital transnational repression or digital transnational espionage. So can you share a little bit about your research and in this topic, and what can Germany and other states, what should they pay attention to, and how can they help combat this phenomenon?
Thank you, and thank you for those interesting comments, Yvonne. So digital transnational oppression, for those of you who are not familiar with the term, arises when states target dissidents, human rights defenders, journalists who are in exile using digital technologies. So spyware is one example, so that very much sits with what Yvonne was saying before in terms of controlling proliferation. But we also see other forms of targeting, for example, disinformation, online harassment, and so on. The US has really been, up to date, the leader in terms of addressing transnational oppression. So I'd be very curious to hear what Germany has been doing in particular, if that's something that your work has touched on in terms of the digital component of transnational oppression. But I think there are different sort of points of intervention that any state who is host to large dissident and diaspora communities can take in order to prevent and mitigate these human rights violations happening on German soil or in another host state. So I think top of the mind is legislation to ensure that this form of espionage, if you want to call it that, particularly where spyware is used, is something that is criminalized in domestic law. And I think different jurisdictions have different definitions of espionage, which can sometimes leave this type of activity on the side because it's targeting the state is not targeting Germany specifically, but it's targeting diaspora and exiled communities. That's one component. Another component is ensuring that domestic legislation by victims or targets of this type of behavior can go forward. I'm not sure how much of that is an issue in Germany, but in the US, for example, state immunity makes it very difficult for victims of digital transnational oppression to, for example, sue the government who is undertaking this activity against them. And I think more concretely, and this might fit a bit more with your mandate, Yvonne, is ensuring logistical, financial, and educational support to community organizations who work with diaspora and exiled communities. And I think this can take a number of different forms, but in particular, I think, and we're seeing more and more of this, I think the US recently started an initiative where the digital threats faced by civil society organizations, including diaspora and exiled community organizations, are being tracked and discussed and published in the public sphere, so people have a better sense of the types of threats that they're up against, right? Requiring diaspora, community, refugee immigrant organizations and communities to do this work is impossible. It is technical and it is complex, but governments are in a better position to dedicate specific resources to identifying, tracking these threats and trying to mitigate them. So I think I'll just leave it at that for now, but I also have some follow-up questions for you, Yvonne, later.
Thank you for that. So indeed, Germany is a home for many refugees and immigrants, dissidents, journalists with wars in Syria and Ukraine and beyond. We have journalists human rights activists who are finding home, finding shelter here, and they are indeed facing these types of repression, not only digital but also poisoning attacks, other types of physical attacks, as well as spyware and digital attacks. So, and the investigation that we published in September of last year, talking about Medusa, the head of Medusa, Galina Timchenko, hacked with Pegasus spyware. We do, and I think in our investigation we talked about the different states that we think might be responsible. We are doing still more research. It does seem like it's more likely that it is actually another state, one of EU states, we suspect. But I wanted to ask, in terms of Germany still, which we think has some responsibility to look into it and investigate, has there been any developments after this report, or maybe other measures that Germany is also taking to combat transnational repression in Germany?
So, again, this is something the Ministry of the Interior has to do, and the relevant security authorities. But let me be really very clear on that. There is a zero tolerance policy for issues like that or things like that happening in Germany. And this is why we are trying to work really the best we can, all the different ministries involved in these areas together, to, first of all, prevent things like this happening. Second, if we feel something like this might have happened, then to see what exactly has been the case, and then also for the legal authorities and the judicial authorities to prosecute this, because this is also the relevant next step. So what we are doing at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is that we are especially looking into how can we shape international norms so that we make it as hard as possible, because I think there's unfortunately no way to make it impossible, but to make it really as hard as possible to do things like that. And if these happen, to really also look into how can we shame this at the international level, at the national and international level. And how can we construct, or how can we incentivize more countries to also update their national legislations to include cases like that, which some don't even have on the agenda, no? I mean, we're looking, the digital is still quite a new framework, and we're looking especially on some continents or in the global south, into frameworks that yet have to really adapt to kind of like the threats posed by cyber and the opportunities, of course, as well. So there we are really trying to do cyber capacity building, especially, for example, with the African Union, we as Federal Foreign Office, to help really with relevant experience we have had in this area. And we are looking in processes like, for example, the UN Cybercrime Convention, where we have a lot of talks about how to use data, and data is something very sensitive, where you might see actually areas of concern also for how it might be being used for repression, how we can best shape this in a way which at least doesn't set kind of like standards at the international level which would say it's okay for nation states to do that, no? Because this is what some are looking for. They want to have a UN framework which says, well, but I mean, it's written there in the UN Convention, it's okay for you to use this and this data for this and this purpose, which, in brackets, you define nationally what the purpose is, and therefore it's UN agreed. So this is something we don't want to give our German government's approval for. So this is kind of like where we see possibilities. It's also a very dire process. It's not something which is very straightforward because it's complex, because there are many different interests involved. So I think this is something where we really need civil society on board to point to us, to point also to us how good legislation, how could good international norms look like, what are points we might have missed, because this is also something which might happen, and there we really need everyone on board.
Thank you. Well, speaking of from civil society, I think we're happy to help in this important effort. And we have been really working on these issues for like Citizen Lab over a decade. And so we're happy to see that there's finally some action by state. We have 10 minutes left, so I would like to open for questions, if the audience has any questions for us. Sure, over here.
Thank you very much. I will join you with the microphone so everybody can hear your question. Please, a short question and not a statement.
Okay.
I keep the microphone. I keep the power.
It's fine. Okay, you have been talking about what the German state can do as positive things, but can you say what could it do to prevent negative things? For example, there's a discussion about hacking back and hoarding, zero-day exploits. Germany, I think the world is a little bit ambivalent what the German state is doing in this field.
Thank you for the question.
Okay, short answer. Actually, it's two topics that you raised. Two topics I'd like to also keep distinct. So first of all, I mean, there's a division between what are we doing nationally and what are we seeing internationally. On hackbacks, actually the coalition treaty is very clear on that. So in the coalition treaty, it says that we don't want to get involved into any hackbacks. I think this is a very, very forward-looking thing, how to conceptualize this. And what happens right now is that there is a discussion about other possibilities, because there are things such as active cyber defense, which are not hackbacks because they stop earlier. And so there's a discussion right now on whether this might be an option, because this is also within the coalition treaty. But these are conversations within the government, within the legislative process, which haven't been completed. So right now, nothing in that regard is happening. Zero-day exploits, it's something we as a government for sure don't do, but it's something we see from other states happening, and we see them as a real threat to security. Some national legislation, for example, if we look to the Asian continent, it also creates the right framework for doing these zero-day exploits. So this is something which exactly by applying international norms and having the right setup, we can try to mitigate, we can try to avoid, but which we probably won't see go away.
Thank you. We have another question right there.
Yeah, I'm on this side.
Hi, thank you very much for this fantastic panel. My name is Helena Hahn. I'm working for Reporters Without Borders, and we are also very concerned about spyware and commercial spyware. And in fact, we are investigating and following up with legal cases against the state of Germany as well, and certain institutions in Germany, because we believe that certain laws, national laws, do have many loopholes. So my question to you, and thank you for being here today as well, is because many reports by Citizen Lab and Access Now and us as well, many other organizations point towards the fact that spyware is actually something that is not compatible with human rights, with international human rights laws. How does the German Federal Office, Foreign Offices look at a complete ban on spyware?
I mean, this again is something we cannot decide by ourselves. So I think for the moment, we follow the line that we want to mitigate the risks. I think that what you said is very interesting, because you said that you're investigating also kind of which loopholes do exist within German national legislation. So, I mean, again, this is something we cannot, at the Federal Foreign Office, heal, but it's something where I'm really happy to pass it on to the Ministry of the Interior and to the relevant experts there, so that they can take a look at it, also in the framework of the initiatives happening. No, I mean, the joint statement, for example, calls to update national legislation, so that we can start like a conversation on that one. And really, I mean, it's exactly the best practice I was talking about, kind of like taking the insights from civil society, from organizations, etc., and using them also for what we might have been blind for.
Okay, we have, I think, a moment for one question.
Hi, thank you for this fantastic panel. My name is Joanna. I'm a consultant with the Spyware Accountability Initiative. And very brief, the EU announced an update to its dual-use regulation, export control, as part of the economic security package this January. And so I wonder, what is your planned interventions and your position on this process, and would it include specifically spyware and spyware type tools under the export control in an effective manner, including enforcement and the required transparency for civil society to engage in these processes? Thank you.
I have heard on the margins about it, but I really don't know. So I can follow up and get back to you, and I will for sure do that, but maybe some of you does know.
Not specifically in the German context, but I think one theme that has come up several times now is not collaboration, I guess, but better information sharing between state and civil society, and I think that goes to the export control laws as well. And I'd just like to say, I think it's a nice idea, but without greater transparency from the German state or any state, it's very difficult to operationalize that. But I think export control is an interesting opening for greater transparency. I think different states in the EU have greater or lesser forms of transparency in terms of disclosing where technology is being exported and who the end users are. So I think that is perhaps a starting point for improvement.
Yeah, from our end, thank you for the question. From our end, we have been engaging on export controls in EU and US, and I think we would argue for the most sort of progressive implementation of it. So capture not only spyware, but also some of the tools that, like deep packet inspections in the case of Sandvine, the technology that used to deliver spyware, like United States has actually added the Sandvine to their entity list and the export controls. So this is really some of the, again, best practices for this. And I wanted to acknowledge Reporters Without Borders and other civil society organizations that are also engaging both in terms of reporting and also with advocacy with the German government and beyond. Thank you for your work. We are at time now, so I would like to thank the speakers for coming today and having this important discussions, and thanks to the audience for the question and for coming to hear us. Thank you.